let's unpack this. A stack of research about optimizing brain chemistry. How to tweak those neurochemicals for peak performance and well-being.
Yeah, we're talking dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, and acetylcholine.
Wow.
The quartet that essentially runs the show inside your head.
Think of them as a control panel for your mood, energy, focus, everything, really. I'm already intrigued and a little intimidated. Where do we even start?
So your nervous system, it's a complex network of neurons, like tiny messengers constantly buzzing with activity.
Okay, I'm picturing a superhighway of signals zipping around.
Yeah.
But how do those signals translate into, feeling motivated or focused?
That's where our neurochemical stars come in. They act like traffic controllers, directing which neural pathways are firing and ultimately influencing how you feel and behave.
Dopamine, that's the go-getter chemical, right?
Exactly. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure, as many think. It's the driving force behind motivation, pushing you towards goals. Think of it as your brain's reward system giving you that, I want that feeling.
And then there's epinephrine, which I always associate with that heart-pounding stress response.
Epinephrine, or adrenaline as it's commonly known, is all about energy and alertness. Gets you ready for action, literally propelling you forward.
So dopamine sets the goal, and epinephrine gives you the energy to chase it.
I like it. What about the feel-good vibes? That's serotonin, right?
Right on. Serotonin is linked to contentment, well-being, and satiety. It helps regulate mood, sleep, and even appetite.
And last but not least, acetylcholine, the brain power booster.
Absolutely. Acetylcholine is crucial for focus, learning, and memory. It's also key for neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change throughout life.
Okay, so we've got our 4 key players. But here's what I find fascinating. These levels aren't static. They fluctuate throughout the day. It's like our brain has its own internal clock.
Precisely. For about 9 hours after you wake up, dopamine and epinephrine are naturally higher, your peak performance window.
So that's why I'm usually most productive in the mornings. Then what happens? As the day progresses, serotonin starts to rise, peaking around 9 to 16 hours after waking, like your body's way of prepping for a wind down.
Makes sense. And then during sleep, it's a whole other roller coaster ride of neurochemical activity.
You bet. Neuromodulator levels fluctuate dramatically during sleep, playing a crucial role in dreaming and those essential restorative functions.
Okay, enough theory. Let's get practical.
Yeah.
How do we actually optimize these neurochemicals? Let's start with dopamine. How can we hack that motivation system?
One of the most powerful tools is surprisingly simple: sunlight. Getting exposure, especially in the eyes and skin early in the day, it's like setting your dopamine clock.
Like hitting the reset button
Brain.
for your brain. But how does sunlight actually boost dopamine?
Studies show that sunlight actually increases the number of a specific dopamine receptor called DRD4. This receptor is linked to motivation and novelty seeking, so boosting it can make you more driven and engaged.
So ditching the morning doom scroll for a sunrise walk could actually rewire my brain for more motivation. Interesting. Now, I can't talk about dopamine without mentioning coffee.
You and me both. Caffeine is a double-edged sword, but in moderation, it can enhance dopamine's effects. It does this by increasing the availability of D2 and D3 dopamine receptors.
So my morning coffee isn't just waking me up, it's priming my brain for action. Now let's talk food. Tyrosine-rich foods. How do they fit into the dopamine puzzle?
So tyrosine is an amino acid, a building block for protein, and guess what? It's also a precursor to dopamine. Foods like Parmesan cheese, meats, and certain veggies are packed with tyrosine.
So loading up on tyrosine is like giving your brain the raw materials to make more dopamine.
Exactly. And this brings us to the cheese effect. It sounds funny, but it powerfully illustrates dopamine's influence.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the cheese effect?
It happens in people taking certain antidepressants that block the breakdown of dopamine. When they eat high tyramine foods like Parmesan cheese, they experience intense migraines and blood pressure spikes.
Whoa, that's intense. But why?
Tyramine triggers a massive release of stored dopamine. Because these individuals are on medication that prevents dopamine breakdown, the levels skyrocket, leading to those unpleasant side effects.
So a case of too much of a good thing.
Precisely. The cheese effect highlights just how potent dopamine is and how even subtle dietary changes can have big effects.
Okay, message received. Respect the dopamine. Now let's talk about a more intense way to boost it. Cold exposure.
Deliberate cold exposure, like cold showers or plunges, is like hitting the boost button for your dopamine system.
I've heard about this, but how does it actually work?
Well, a 2000 study found that cold water immersion significantly increases dopamine transmission. We're not talking about a tiny blip either. The effects are substantial and can last for hours.
So are we saying a cold plunge is better than a cup of coffee for boosting dopamine?
Not necessarily. It's more about having a diverse toolkit. You might find cold exposure works best for you in the morning, while a cup of coffee is your go-to for an afternoon pick-me-up. It's all about understanding these tools and how they fit into your individual needs.
That's a great point. It's about personalization, not just finding the one magic bullet.
Yeah.
Any other dopamine boosting tips before we move on?
A couple more. B vitamins, particularly B6, play a role in regulating prolactin, a hormone that tends to suppress dopamine.
So ensuring we're getting enough B vitamins can help keep those dopamine levels in check.
Exactly. But be cautious with excessive B6 intake. It can have negative effects on your nerves.
Noted. What else?
Avoid bright light between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. It can disrupt dopamine levels and negatively impact sleep, which we know is crucial for dopamine regulation.
It all comes back to sleep, doesn't it? Maintaining those healthy sleep cycles is essential for a happy brain. Speaking of happy brains, let's move on to epinephrine. I think a lot of people want to decrease their adrenaline, but we actually need some, right? It's what gives us that get-up-and-go energy.
You got it. And just like with dopamine, there are ways to increase epinephrine strategically. Any form of physical activity will do the trick.
Wait, even just chatting away can boost my epinephrine.
It might not feel as intense as a workout, but your locus coeruleus, the brain area responsible for epinephrine release, is activated by any type of action.
So my daily Wordle battles are actually mini adrenaline rushes. I knew there was a reason I love those.
Yeah.
I'm guessing exercise is even more effective.
Absolutely. Physical activity is like epinephrine's best friend. Even a brisk walk can make a difference. And of course, we can't forget our old pal, caffeine. It's a 2-for-1 deal, boosting both dopamine and epinephrine.
All right, so we've got movement and caffeine for an epinephrine boost.
Yeah.
What about those breathing exercises I hear so much about? Can they really increase adrenaline?
They can. Cyclic hyperventilation with its deep inhales and exhales triggers a surge in epinephrine. Think Wim Hof breathing or Tumo breathing.
I always thought those were more for relaxation, not ramping up energy.
They can be relaxing, but they also activate the sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight response, which leads to that epinephrine boost. You might even feel a bit agitated if you do too many rounds.
Good to know. So maybe not the best choice if I'm already feeling stressed.
Probably not. But for those looking for a quick energy boost and mental clarity, it's worth exploring. And you know what else increases epinephrine? You guessed it, cold exposure.
So that cold plunge is like the ultimate brain hack. Dopamine, A&D, epinephrine, sign me up.
It's a powerful tool, that's for sure. Speaking of powerful tools, let's shift gears and talk about acetylcholine, that master of focus and learning. When it comes to acetylcholine, diet is key.
So what should we be eating to fuel up on acetylcholine?
Foods rich in choline are your best bet. Think eggs, beef, soybeans, and chicken. They provide the building blocks for this crucial neurochemical.
So making those a regular part of my diet can support healthy acetylcholine levels.
Got it. Now, are there supplements that can boost acetylcholine as well? There are. Alpha-GPC and huperzine are two popular options. They're known to boost acetylcholine in the short term. You know, I actually started experimenting with alpha-GPC before big presentations a few months ago, and I was amazed by how much it helped me stay focused. Have you tried it yourself?
I have. I'm a complete convert. I take it before anything that needs serious mental horsepower workouts, even writing this podcast. It's like it tunes out the mental chatter and helps me tap into that flow state. What about you?
It definitely helped me sharpen my focus during those presentations. Acetylcholine is all about increasing the signal-to-noise ratio in your brain, helping you filter out distractions and focus on what's important.
And I've also heard about behavioral techniques to increase acetylcholine. Is that right?
Absolutely. Deliberately narrowing your visual focus for short periods can actually enhance acetylcholine transmission.
It's like focus training for your eyes.
Precisely. Research shows that these types of exercises can improve focus and even enhance learning. It's fascinating how much control we have over our brain chemistry just by tweaking our behavior.
It's empowering, isn't it? It's not just about what we eat or the supplements we take, but how we train our minds and bodies. Speaking of feeling empowered, let's talk about our last neurochemical, serotonin. I think this is one a lot of people will be interested in.
Serotonin is the key to that feeling of contentment and well-being. And while many people might think of prescription drugs when they hear serotonin, there are some incredibly effective behavioral tools for boosting it.
Let's hear it. What are some natural ways to boost serotonin?
Physical contact with loved ones, holding hands, hugs, even petting your dog. These can trigger serotonin release and make you feel good.
I can definitely relate to that. There's something so comforting and mood-boosting about a good hug.
It's not just about feeling good either. These acts of physical affection actually increase serotonin transmission in the brain. And another surprisingly powerful tool is gratitude.
Gratitude. Okay, tell me more.
And here's a surprising fact. Receiving gratitude has a more potent effect on serotonin than giving it.
Really? I would have thought it was the other way around.
It's counterintuitive, but research is clear. Observing gratitude also boosts your serotonin.
So surround yourself with grateful people.
Exactly. And when it comes to diet, tryptophan-rich foods are important for serotonin production.
Milk, turkey, oats, certain fruits.
You got it. It's all about giving your body the building blocks it needs to create serotonin.
Now, I know there are supplements for boosting serotonin, but I've heard they can be tricky. What's your take?
There are a few, but they should be approached with caution. Cis quadrangularis and 5-HTP are two that have been shown to be effective, but potential side effects need to be considered.
I've heard that 5-HTP can be helpful for sleep.
It can be, but I've found it to be hit or miss. Some people experience very deep sleep for a few hours and then wake up unable to fall back asleep. I've personally had better luck with myo-inositol.
Myo-inositol, that's a new one for me. Tell me more.
It's a lesser-known supplement, but it's been shown to increase serotonin levels and has been explored for treating anxiety and improving sleep.
Interesting. What's your experience been like with it?
I've had some remarkable results with it, particularly for sleep. It seems to promote deep, restful sleep without the rebound insomnia I've experienced with 5-HTP.
So it's a potential alternative for those who struggle with sleep and want to explore natural ways to increase serotonin. I love it. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from sunlight and cold plunges to gratitude and even the power of a good hug. It's amazing to think we have so much control over these brain chemicals that impact our daily lives.
And what's important to remember is that these tools, whether they're behavioral, nutritional, or supplements, all tap into the same neurochemical systems. We're not just randomly tweaking things, we're working with our brain's natural systems to create the outcomes we desire.
It's like having a control panel. For our brain chemistry, we can choose which buttons to push depending on the desired outcome.
Precisely. Do you want to boost your motivation? Increase dopamine, need more energy, focus on epinephrine, looking for a sense of calm and well-being. Serotonin is your friend, and if you need laser-like focus, acetylcholine is there to support you.
It's about understanding these neuromodulators and having a variety of tools to adjust them. It's so empowering.
I agree. What I find particularly exciting is that it gives you a sense of agency. You're not at the mercy of your brain chemistry. You can actively influence it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not about finding the one perfect tool, but rather building a toolkit that works for you and your individual needs.
That's a crucial point. What works for one person might not work for another. It's all about experimentation and finding what resonates with your body and brain.
So what does this all mean? You are not at the mercy of your brain chemistry. Understanding these 4 key neuromodulators is like having a cheat sheet for how your brain operates.
By strategically using these tools, you can shift your mental and physical state, from laser focus to a deep sense of calm. And remember, we've only scratched the surface here.
Here's a final thought to mull over. We've focused on how to increase these neuromodulators. But what about the power of decreasing them? Could there be benefits to strategically dialing down dopamine, epinephrine, or even serotonin at times?
That's an excellent question, and one we should definitely explore further. There's always more to learn and discover about this incredible system we call the brain. That's a fascinating question. There's this idea that more is always better, but with brain chemistry, it's all about balance.
You're right. It's like the Goldilocks principle. Not too much, not too little, but just right. And the just right amount might vary, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the situation.
Exactly. Sometimes dialing down certain neurochemicals can be beneficial. For example, lowering dopamine strategically can help with impulse control and even enhance creativity.
That's counterintuitive, but I see the logic. If we're constantly chasing that dopamine rush, we might miss out on those quiet moments where creative ideas can bubble up.
Precisely. It's about understanding the ebb and flow of these neurochemicals and how to ride those waves effectively.
This is blowing my mind. Okay, so we've talked about how to increase these neurochemicals. What about decreasing them? Where do we even begin?
Well, let's start with dopamine. One effective strategy for dialing down excessive dopamine is mindfulness meditation.
Mindfulness meditation. Really? I always thought of meditation as a way to, relax
Yeah.
and de-stress.
It definitely does that, but it also has a profound effect on dopamine. Studies show that regular mindfulness practice can actually reduce dopamine activity
Right.
in certain areas of the brain.
So it's not about eliminating dopamine altogether, but rather creating a calmer state, more balanced.
Exactly, and this can be incredibly beneficial for managing cravings, improving focus, and even reducing addictive behaviors.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together. It's not just about hacking our way to peak performance. It's about understanding the nuances of our brain chemistry and finding that sweet spot where we can thrive.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, this is an ongoing journey, not a destination. Your brain is constantly adapting and changing, so it's important to stay curious and keep experimenting with different strategies.
It's like we've been given this amazing toolkit, but we have to learn how to use it effectively.
That's a great analogy. And the more we learn about these tools, the more empowered we become to shape our own mental and emotional landscape.
So what does this all mean for our listener?
It means you have more control over your brain chemistry than you might realize. By understanding these 4 key neurochemicals, dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, and acetylcholine, and learning how to adjust them, you can optimize your mood, energy, focus, and well-being. And remember, it's not just about increasing these neurochemicals, but also understanding when and how to decrease them for optimal balance.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how my brain works and how to make it work better for me. It's like I've been handed the owner's manual to my brain. It's amazing to think we have this much control over our mental and emotional states.
It really is. And the best part is we're only scratching the surface. There's so much more to discover about the intricate workings of our brains.
Okay, I have to ask, what are some of the most cutting-edge discoveries in this field that have you really excited?
One area that's particularly fascinating is the research on psychedelics and their potential therapeutic benefits.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this lately. How are psychedelics changing our understanding of brain chemistry?
Well, for decades, psychedelics were, demonized and largely dismissed by the scientific community. But in recent years, there's been a resurgence of research, and the findings are groundbreaking.
What are some of the most promising discoveries?
Studies are showing that compounds like psilocybin, found in magic mushrooms, can actually promote neuroplasticity, the growth of new brain cells and connections.
So psychedelics could potentially rewire our brains for the better.
That's the idea. They seem to create a temporary state of hyperconnectivity in the brain, allowing different regions to communicate in ways they normally wouldn't. This can lead to profound shifts in perspective, emotional breakthroughs, and even the resolution of long-standing psychological issues.
Almost like psychedelics are acting like a reboot for the brain, shaking things up and creating new possibilities.
That's a great way to put it. Of course, this research is still in its early stages, and it's crucial to approach psychedelics with caution and respect. But the potential benefits for mental health are incredibly exciting.
It definitely feels like we're on the cusp of a major paradigm shift in how we understand and treat mental health. So given everything we've learned today, what's one key takeaway you hope our listener will walk away with?
I hope they'll remember that their brain is not fixed. It's a dynamic, ever-changing organ, and they have the power to influence it. By understanding the basic principles of brain chemistry and using the tools we've discussed today, they can take an active role in shaping their mental and emotional well-being.
It's empowering, isn't it? We're not just passive passengers in our own minds. We have the ability to steer the ship.
Exactly. And that's a message I think everyone needs to hear.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this incredible deep dive. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired and ready to put all this knowledge into action.
Me too. It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating topic with you.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey into the incredible world of brain chemistry. Remember, you have the power to optimize your brain for peak performance and well-being. Keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep exploring the amazing potential of your mind.